what are the managers of the system trying to do? The managers of the system are moving us in the direction of another anti-Jewish genocide.
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Aaron Sokol, and you're watching Parsha Inspired. My guest today isn't a rabbi. He's an anthropologist with a PhD from UCLA, taught at the University of Pennsylvania and one of Mexico's leading universities. But what's fascinating isn't just his academic work. He's a Mexican, or a person who has been living in Mexico, who left everything behind, moved to Ashkelon, embraced the Noahide movement, and believes we're watching the redemption described in the Tanakh unfold before our eyes. Dr. Gil White, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, when did you discover your Noahide path, and what drew you to it?
Well, it was a consequence of doing historical research. So the first thing that got me interested in these kinds of topics was the Arab-Israeli conflict. So I did a PhD thesis at UCLA, anthropology, on the question of racism. So I was interested in understanding why are we racist? In other words, why is the human cognitive system designed in such a way that we become so vulnerable to the racist appeals of certain political entrepreneurs? Because obviously these racist political entrepreneurs have considerable success, you know, sort of manipulating people and getting them excited and angry and getting them to think in racist terms happens over and over again. So what is it? What are those cognitive attachments that we have in our psychological design that make us so vulnerable to these racist appeals? That's what I wanted to understand. So I wrote a whole I did a whole research on that, and I produced a new theory to explain how the human psychology was put together by evolution, and how that history has created these vulnerabilities. The way we process social categories has made us prime targets for racist appeals. So my theory explains that, and that became it quickly became very influential. And as a result of that work, I was hired at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, at the University of Pennsylvania, they wanted me to teach this stuff, and they wanted me to participate in a think tank they had created that was a joint project of political science and psychology. I was hired at psychology, but and this think tank was housed in the psychology department. And the whole point of the think tank was to study ethnopolitical conflict. It was called the Solomon Asch Center for Study of Ethnopolitical Conflict. And the main area of research there was the Arab-Israeli conflict, the civil wars in Yugoslavia, the civil wars in Sri Lanka, but mostly the Arab-Israeli conflict. That was the big topic. And as a result of that, I became interested to study myself the Arab-Israeli conflict. Before I got there, I was not an expert in it. I knew a little bit about it, or I thought I knew a little bit about it from reading the New York Times and so forth, but it had not been the subject of my research. Now it did become the subject of my research. So I started studying the history of the Arab-Palestinian movement on the one hand, and the Zionist movement on the other hand, and that began my journey down the rabbit hole. So as I began studying that, I found that the founding father of the Arab-Palestinian movement had also directed the death camp system with Adolf Eichmann for the German Nazis. Okay, I'm not going to get into that whole history right now because your question is about something else. But when I saw this, it changed my life. I realized suddenly that the entire Oslo process, which was to bring PLO Fatah inside the state of Israel, PLO Fatah being a creation of the same Haj Amin al-Husseini, the founder of the Arab Palestinian movement, right? Uh, butcher of the European Jews, right? They were bringing his organization into the state of Israel. That's what the Oslo process is. So when I understood this, it changed my life. I concluded that the Oslo process was an attack on the Israeli Jews, and that brought to the fore the question why. Why is this going on? Why, after the Shoah, are the most powerful people in the world working together to create a diplomatic process to bring the spawn of the German Nazi final solution into the state of Israel? This, what's going on? And this is a process that was directed by the American presidents. So clearly, the current empire was once again persecuting the Jews the way the current empire is always doing in Western history. That question, why is this still going on? What is going on with anti-Semitism? Where does it come from? Why does it never end? Um, that sent me down into a deeper historical research that took me all the way back. So I ended up producing I'm still publishing it, a 10-volume history of the West, which I call The Collapse of the West, the Next Holocaust and Its Consequences. And the whole point of that is to explain the entire history of anti-Semitism as a central thread in the political history of the West. My claim became that anti-Semitism is a tool of totalitarianism, and the people who want to enslave everybody are always recruiting anti-Semitism in order to destroy liberty, in order to destroy progress. And the reason anti-Semitism works for them for this purpose is that the Jewish movement is the one that has been pushing in the opposite direction. In other words, the Jewish movement, based on a slave revolt, the story of Exodus is the story of an Israelite slave revolt against an oppressive Egyptian king. And after the slave revolt succeeds and the former Israelite slaves are in liberty in the Sinai desert, they get a new law, which is a utopian law designed to make sure that these people will never be oppressed again. Okay, so this Exodus story and the law that comes out of the Exodus story that becomes the constitution of the Jewish people. That's the movement for abolishing slavery, for ending oppression, for protecting liberty, for giving rights to everybody, and so forth. And that influence is what began transforming the West. So the people who want to work against that process and want to re-enslave us and extinguish liberty, those people understand that they have to destroy the Jewish movement in order to establish a permanent sort of totalitarian slavery on all of us. And that so this became my explanation for why anti-Semitism never goes away and why anti-Semitism is always linked to the slavery of everybody else, of all the non-Jews. Now, once I began studying this, uh, the thing that most impressed me in, let us say, the long sweep of history, the long arc of history, was the improbability of the performance of the Jewish movement. It seemed to me that there's just no way that God is not involved in this, because the entire historical and political performance of the Jews seems miraculous to me. It seems impossible. And I can say why in very few words. Given that the Jews represent the movement that is liberating everybody, the people who want to enslave us all always organize mass killings of Jews, as I just explained. And what this means is that you should expect the Jewish movement to have been the most unstable movement in all of history. If this is a movement that invites genocidal attacks by oppressors, which it clearly does, then you should have expected this movement to have been snuffed out of history a long time ago. It shouldn't have survived. The odds are completely against it, and so the fact that today you cannot find any of the peoples that were contemporaries of the Jews 2,500 years ago, but the Jews are still here, when it is the Jews who should have ceased existing a long time ago from all of these genocidal attacks, convinced me that something very special is going on with the Torah, which is the book that produces the Jews. And I ended up convinced that I it didn't seem like the Torah could have been written by a human being. It's just too perfect. It solves. I mean, in order to get the Jews, the author of the Torah needs to understand evolutionary theory, systems theory, anthropology, psychology, politics. He needs to understand everything, so that he knows how to put one word after another in the right sequence that will produce this utter sociological and political miracle that is the Jewish people. So that's how I transitioned from atheism, because when I began this research, I was an atheist, into belief. And I had been a Catholic as an adolescent and as a child, um, but now I became a Noahide, because what what all of this work convinced me of was that the true religion is Judaism. It's the religion that has been saving all of us throughout the centuries. And but I didn't convert to Judaism, and so so the category I ended up is in the Noahide category, which I learned later is an actual formal category created by the rabbis to capture people like me.
Maybe share with us what the process of becoming a Noahide is.
Sure. So becoming a Noahide, let us say in the sense of conviction, requires nothing more than uh, convincing yourself that the Judaism is the true religion, that God is involved with the Jews and with the Torah, um, without converting to Judaism. So that if you do that, then you are automatically a Noachide. You may not be formally a Noachide if you haven't made the Noachide profession of faith in a rabbinical court. Uh, if you do that, then you are formally a Noachide. In other words, you are now recognized by rabbinical society as a member of the Jewish of the let us say extended Jewish community, right? So what Rabbi Uri Shirky and the other two rabbis, who Chaim Goldberg and Yehuda HaKohen, who formed the Beit Din that received me into the Noahide community, what they said when the ritual was over is, they said, now you are one of us. In other words, there is now no barrier between me and the rest of the Jews, in the sense of we are all one Torah community, right? That's what they meant. Um, and the ritual is just an acceptance of the 7 laws that correspond to the Noahide. So a Noahide, because a Noahide is not a Jew, a Noahide is not making a covenant to follow all of the 613 commandments included in the Halacha. Okay, so the 613 commandments that the rabbis have identified in the Torah, those are not for me. I have to follow the 7 laws of Noah only, and those 7 laws are they're the basic principles of ethics. Right? Don't steal, don't commit murder, um, don't participate in sexual perversions or sexual immorality of any kind, uh, etc. So it's a way of uh, it's a way, the seven laws are a way of ensuring that a non-Jew will be an ethical person without having to insist that this non-Jew be a Jew. In other words, that this non-Jew follow all of the specific laws that have to do with a Jewish way of life according to the Torah and the Halacha. Okay, so that's what I did. I'm in the Beit Din of Rabbi Uri Shirky. I professed that I will honor the seven laws of Noach, and and that was basically it. It was a very quick ritual.
Was America founded on Noahide principles?
I think yes, because modern Western civilization was established on the basis of Christian morality, which is itself largely Jewish morality. Okay, so the Christians get their value system from the Jewish value system. They don't they don't um, obey all of the laws that the Jews live by, because uh, one of the main things that happens with Christianity is that Paul, who is the main communicator of Catholic Christianity, he substitutes the law with the grace of God. So in Paul's interpretation, the death and resurrection of Jesus is itself an expiatory rite that the deity officiates to himself in order to forgive everybody's sins. And the fact of the sacrifice then substitutes for the law as the requirement of salvation. However, the spirit of the law does live on in the Christian community, because the values that are inherent to Jewish law, the ethical values that guide Jewish law, which Rabbi Hillel the Elder famously summarized with the commandment Leviticus 19:18, love your brother, love your neighbor as you love yourself, which he paraphrased as, if you hate something, don't do it to your neighbor, right? Um, that value system, inherent in Jewish law, productive of Jewish law, is inherited to Christians. So for Christians, the Ten Commandments, which is a summary of the ethical principles, have always been very important. Um, and those ethical principles, and Jesus, by the way, agreed with Hillel that the entire logic, philosophical and ethical logic of the law was summarized by Leviticus 19:18. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the ethical system of the Jews is an inheritance of the Christians. And modern the modern Western world was built by Christians on that ethical basis, on that value system. So given that the Christians don't follow the rest of the Jewish law, given that they do follow the basic ethical principles inherent in Jewish law, which are themselves captured in the seven laws of Noah, it does make sense to, from a certain perspective, to say that the Christians are Noahides. They're not technically Noahides, because to be technically a Noahide, you would have to renounce Christianity. In other words, there's a controversy between the Christians and Jews over the status of Jesus. To Christians, Jesus is the Son of God, and God Himself. Whereas for Jews and the Messiah, the expected Messiah of the Jews, Jews do not accept that interpretation. So that is a real controversy between Christians and Jews. It's a theological controversy. It's not a values controversy. So uh, to be technically a Noahide, you would have to agree with the Jews on theology as well, which is my case. Right? I don't accept Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. I don't believe he was the Son of God. I respect him as an important Jewish leader, and I like him, especially the historical Jesus, the one that we can try to reconstruct, not necessarily through the Pauline text. But I don't believe the theological interpretation of Jesus that is so important to Christians. So I am a Noahide in the technical sense, but Christians can be called Noahides in a looser sense because they match. In other words, they correspond to the basic description of a Noahide as someone who adheres to Jewish ethics without following all of the Jewish law. And therefore, in that looser sense, I think it does make sense to consider modern Western civilization as a Noahide civilization. And that's why I think modern Western civilization, in many respects, is good and much better than what we had centuries ago.
Okay, so that brings us to the heart of the conversation. Okay, so management of reality. What is management of reality?
Well, management of reality is an effort to explain to Westerners primarily, although of course I'm happy to speak to people outside of the West, but it's primarily an effort to defend the West. So I'm trying to explain to Westerners the system that they're in, and we call it management of reality because one of the things I've discovered through the work I've done over the years, and in particular as a result of my contact with Jared Israel, who is the one who taught me how to do geopolitical research. Uh, I've understood the Western system as a managed reality. Okay, and Jared was the first great modern theorist of this of this managed reality system. The first great theorist is from the 19th century. His name was Maurice Joly. Um, George Orwell was also a very important theorist of this kind of thing. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make Westerners aware of the fact that the institutions that are responsible for managing our reality, the meaning makers in the media, in academia, in government, and in alleged non-government, the whole space of NGOs, which is supposed to not be government, but of course they are government. They're clandestinely all government, almost all government. Those meaning makers are creating a false reality for us to inhabit. And by creating that false reality, they manipulate us into behaving in the ways that are convenient to the managers of the system. Okay. Now, what are the managers of the system trying to do? The reason I call my book series The Collapse of the West, The Next Holocaust and Its Consequences is precisely that what my model says is that the managers of the system are moving us in the direction of another anti-Jewish genocide. So the people running the United States and running the European countries, these people were eugenicists before World War II. Eugenics being the parent movement that produced German Nazism. Eugenics was incredibly popular among the power elites all over the West, who think of themselves as descended from Germanic tribes, and who therefore were very excited about this idea that German blood is somehow superior. Okay, they loved this idea. So they were all eugenicists, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Fords, the Harrimans, Thomas Watson at IBM, the British King Edward VIII, almost the entire British aristocracy, Neville Chamberlain, Winston Churchill, they were all eugenicists. And eugenics, I repeat, is the movement that fathered German Nazism. Okay. So where did these eugenicists go after World War II? They didn't go anywhere. They're still in power. One of the clearest demonstrations of this is that after World War II, the CIA was created by absorbing in secret Fremde Heer Ost, which was Adolf Hitler's intelligence infrastructure in Eastern Europe, commanded by General Reinhard Gehlen. So they, after the war, they grabbed Reinhard Gehlen and they said, "Hey, recreate this for us." And he recreated Fremde Heer Ost, and that became the CIA. Okay, well, it's a diagnostic tell. I mean, why would they be absorbing the Nazis if they're not still the eugenicists, right? So So the eugenicists are still in power, and they're doing what Nazis do. They've been moving the system so that it produces another anti-Jewish genocide, and they're going to enslave us all. Um, Now, this is the necessary context in which to understand your question, because, or rather, my answer to your question, because the system I'm describing is one that is being managed from the clandestine services. Okay, so when you think about the CIA, which is obviously the most important of these, uh, to understand it, you need to read the text of the 1947 National Security Act, which is the law that created the CIA, the National Security Agency, and some other intelligence outfits in the United States. And what that law says is that the CIA can initiate any activity at any point without asking anyone. They don't have to ask anyone. They're entirely outside of the law. And they can postpone the report of any such activity indefinitely merely by making the claim that the report would harm national security. That's all they have to do. So, well, this is basically giving them absolute power within the confines of the budget that they have access to. But then it turns out that the budget is a state secret, so it's basically limitless. And we're talking about a giant teat, right? I mean, this is the U.S. Treasury that they're milking. It's the biggest concentration of money in the history of the planet. So if you have a clandestine service that can spend the money of U.S. citizens in secret without giving any account, well, what you've created is a mechanism to corrupt the entire West. So the clandestine service of the United States has been busy corrupting everything, and there have been several demonstrations of this, scandalous demonstrations of this. So, for example, in 1967, a tiny U.S. magazine, Ramparts, it was a Catholic magazine. It had begun as a Catholic magazine, and then it became this swashbuckling, muckraking, truth to power rebellion. That's what Ramparts became. And in 1967, they published an expose that documented how the CIA had taken over the National Student Association, which was the biggest such association in the United States. It was a gigantic institution. So the National Student Association was a front for the CIA, and when Ramparts exposed this, it became a tremendous scandal, and it set in motion a bunch of additional investigations that uncovered that the CIA had basically corrupted all of civil society in the United States. They had their fingers everywhere, including the media and the universities. Okay. Now, not all of this was explained to the public, but a lot of it was, because these investigations ended up producing the Church Committee in the Senate. It was led by Senator Frank Church. And the Church Committee, that's a nickname. The real name was the Senate Committee to Investigate the Activities of U.S. Intelligence, or something like that. The whole point was to find out what the CIA had been doing in secret that might be illegal. And they uncovered all kinds of things, all kinds of terrifying things, including MK Ultra, which is about which there are now hearings again in the U.S. Congress, because there are people in Congress who are demanding that whatever files are still exist about MK Ultra, because a lot of it was destroyed by Richard Helms, CIA Director Richard Helms. But whatever is still existing that has been redacted, they want all of that released, because it's been many years now, and no argument can now be made that would hurt national security right now. But we'll see what happens with that. But the point is, MK Ultra was terrifying because it was a mind control program. The CIA was trying to find out how to control the minds of human beings as if they were robots, and they were using drugs. What do you call this? Electroshock electroshock therapy, torture, and all kinds of things on innocent people to try to figure out how to control minds. And one of the things they were trying to do is how to create what they call a Manchurian candidate. In other words, someone who's been so brainwashed that you can turn them on with maybe a key phrase that becomes like the on switch for turning them into assassins, and then they go kill someone, and then you give them the phrase that turns them off, and they can't remember anything. They can't remember who trained them, what they did, nothing. So they would be the perfect assassins, right? They were trying to create this kind of thing. Now, that's just one example of the terrifying things that were found. Another example is most people don't know anything about this. We have an article about this on the website. Um, they were spraying millions of U.S. citizens with experimental bioweapons for years. Millions of U.S. citizens. Okay, U.S. citizens still don't know about this now, but it was aired in the Senate. Okay, so there was a hearing about this. It was even reported in the Washington Post. Then they stopped talking about it. It was never mentioned again. But it was revealed in the Senate. This particular scandal was revealed in the period 1975 to 77. Now, once you understand that the clandestine services are doing all of this stuff in secret, that they're corrupting everything, committing these enormous crimes, it should come as no surprise. These are the Nazis, right? They absorbed the Nazis to create the CIA. So it should come as no surprise that the CIA, which is the organ that produces U.S. foreign policy, is trying to produce an anti-Jewish genocide. That that's par for the course. This is what Nazis do, right? And since they have the power to corrupt anything, you should expect them to be corrupting the people who govern the Jews, because that's going to make them. It's going to make it a lot easier to kill the Jews, right? If you can exert control over the people who claim to be leading the Jewish people, it's going to be a lot easier to kill the Jews, right? So you should absolutely expect them to do that. Now, you tell me that when you perceive what is happening in Israel, it seems to you that the people, the Israeli bosses are not protecting the Israeli Jews. Am I correct? Is that what you expressed?
Yeah, I think you said it best when we last spoke. You mentioned that the presidents of the United States consistently were giving billions of dollars to the jihadists, meaning that yes, the leaders. Every time it seems like we're getting somewhere, you made this. We spoke about this last time, and this was and what recently happened with this peace deal seems like everything you've told me, you've actually predicted this. Guys, if you're watching this video, I'm going to leave a link to our previous interview. Watch that interview and then watch the news and then tell me, this is unbelievable. It literally was predicted on this channel and it happened and nobody thought that would happen. And that's,
Yeah, well, we
except we
actually
did,
have.
except we did. Yeah.
We also have a video, one of our live videos that we did, a live podcast, where where I compare the headlines of this quote unquote peace deal, that the memorandum, and also the what do they call it? The
Agreement to
memorandum of
disagree.
understanding. The memorandum.
Agreement to disagree. Yeah.
The memorandum of understanding. The MOU. So we compare what has been reported that is contained in this MOU to the predictions I made before and during the war about how this war was going to end. And you're right, my predictions came out. I did pretty well. And the reason I made those predictions is that I have this model that says, as you were mentioning, that the policy of the U.S. bosses is pro-jihadi and anti-Jewish, and as you said, they've been promoting the jihadis, funding them, arming them, helping them diplomatically, et cetera, et cetera. and they have been consistently undermining the security of the state of Israel. So what I explained before the war, and you're right that nobody agreed with me. In fact, I got a lot of a lot of what's the word? A lot of negative comments in my YouTube videos. A lot of people dissenting, saying, "Nah, nah, nah, you're just stubborn. Look, you should abandon your model. You've been refuted, blah blah blah, because Trump attacked Iran." But what I was explaining before the attack was, look, Trump is not going to attack Iran unless that's bad for Israel. So the only situation in which Trump would attack Iran would be to make things even worse for Israel. Why did I say this? Because we've seen in the past other instances of U.S. bosses attacking the same jihadis that they had created in the first place, right? So the Afghan jihadis are a U.S. creation, the ISIS jihadis are a U.S. creation, and the Iranian ayatollahs in Iran are also a U.S. creation. And every time they attacked, like when they attacked the Afghan jihadis, they made them stronger. When they attacked the ISIS jihadis, it seemed like they defeated them. But what they achieved there was give the Iranian jihadis a land corridor all the way to the northern border of Israel. That's what the war against ISIS achieved. And then Trump made ISIS, what remained of ISIS, the government of Syria, right? So when you observe these very consistent events, the obvious prediction from the point of view of this model is, well, if Trump attacks Iran, that's going to have to be very bad for Israel, and somehow he's going to improve the situation of the jihadis. I don't know how, because and I was very explicit about this. I can't say exactly how they're going to do it, because they're always working on several different parallel lines, and there are many different ways in which they can hurt Israel and strengthen the jihadis. So exactly which policy they're going to set in motion, I don't know. I was alternating between different possibilities. So one possibility was what they did, that they would let the ayatollahs survive and they would strengthen them in different ways and save Hezbollah and so forth. Another possibility is that they were going to do regime change in Iran and then give the whole Iranian access to Turkey, which is now more and more explicitly saying that they're going to destroy Israel. So and they are the patrons of ISIS in Syria, right? So I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I could make a very definite qualitative prediction. And what I said is they're going to uh, destroy the security of Israel, and they're going to improve the position of the jihadis, and they won't let Israel destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon. I did make that specific prediction, and it came out pretty good. I mean, it came out horrible, but in terms of matching my predictions, it matched them pretty good.
Isaiah says, Atem Edai, you, the Jewish people, are my witness, that our existence, despite all these plans and all these plots to destroy the Jewish people, and these plots have been going on for a long time, and now it has become, like, as you say, a plot in the head. It's a theological slavery that's slowly creeping in and being influenced, not just financially, but
Well,
also.
but it's not just theological. Forgive me for interrupting you. It's if the Israeli bosses are behaving like servants of the U.S. president, then it's not just a theological slavery; it's political too.
Yeah, it's political. I maybe used that wrong. So, but the enslavement of people, I mean, another thing that came to mind is you mentioned that once you give something a label, you can then kill it. Like if you say it's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism, then you can go out, kill and murder and maim. You don't, because you're not no longer dealing with people, you're dealing with an ideology. So what's, you're here in Israel. So what's your vision of the future?
Well, I mean, my prediction is contingent on the reaction of the Israelis and the reaction of Westerners more broadly to the events that are unfolding and to the information that we're trying to get to them, right? So if present trends continue, there will be a genocide of the Israeli Jews. That's what the trend is right now. Okay, so but the trend may not be the trend in another month or in another 3 months. It all depends on how the Israelis react to the current danger they're in and how Westerners react to the danger they're also in. So we are seeing all over the West that Westerners are beginning to wake up. So we're seeing the beginning of a civil war in Britain against the Muslim invasion and against which the British government has imposed on Britons, because this is something that the British government is doing to them. So that's a situation parallel to the one that we've been describing for the state of Israel. And but it now seems, I mean, I wouldn't have said this a few months ago, but it now seems like Britain has a fighting chance to survive. I'm encouraged by the fact that there is an awakening. I'm not happy that there is violence in the streets, and I'm worried that um, if there's a real civil war, the government will use that as an excuse to declare a state of emergency, and then, you know, formally enslave the Britons, right? Because that's what happens in a state of emergency. People's rights and liberties are suspended. So I'm worried that a civil war is precisely what the British bosses have been trying to produce to give themselves this excuse. And my concern is that if the awakening Europeans launch an effort, if they start a civil war before, well, they're not starting the civil war, the Muslims are doing that, but if the battles in the streets erupt before they change the government, then they're in a very, very bad spot because the government is on the side of the Muslim invasion. They're not, the governments of Europe are not on the side of Europeans. So they're in a very dangerous spot. And my recommendation would be, now you have to kick these people out of power first because you need the state on your side. You can't be, it's too dangerous for you to be fighting the state and the Muslims at the same time.
It's
Uh,
happened already in New York City with the largest concentration of Jews outside of Israel is in New York City, and they've elected a what I believe is a Shiite 12er Muslim to be mayor who sides with globalized intifada. I don't say that he sides with it. He will not condone it. He will not say that it's wrong to say that. And yet he is, and he, I don't know if you saw his most recent, you shouldn't watch it if you haven't seen it, but his most recent statement on the America 250, which I thought, and a lot of people gave him a lot of slack because he obviously is not a friend of the Jews.
no, 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 absolutely not. Nor is he a friend of Westerners more broadly. I mean, he's a communist. And communists are specialists at grinding Westerners into slavery and utterly destroying them. This is what communists always do. And the only reason that he got voted into office is that our educational systems never educate about communism. They never do that. And the reason they don't do that is that the people teaching us are all communists. The people, the professors in the universities, they're all Marxists. Almost all of them are Marxists, and their work sets the agenda for teachers at every level, right? So think about the structure. You have universities all over the West where the professors in social sciences and humanities, the ones who uh, are addressing issues that intersect with moral issues, right, and with political issues. Those people are all Marxists. Well, almost all of them. What that means is that in the departments of education, where teachers are trained, where people get their degrees in education, those people are being trained by Marxists too. And so those people go to teach our children in primary school and high school and so forth. They're preparing them for university. Well, the narratives that they're sharing are obviously consistent with what the Marxist professors at the university are teaching in the first place. So the entire system is designed so that nobody will learn about the dangers of communism, of Marxism. And therefore, they can be duped over and over again into thinking that Marxism is going to save them. And that's what happened in New York.
Clearly says it that, he believes that there are greedy billionaires who are controlling everything, and we have to take their money away and give it to the poor. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well,
Uh,
I have nothing against protecting people from greedy billionaires,
oh
but
yeah, yeah,
it is one thing to say
but with the
that
Jews, I think, are the greedy billionaires that he's
right.
referring to.
Well, but in any case, if a greedy billionaire is doing harm, of course we should do something about that. But the fact that some greedy billionaires do harm does not mean that the
Yeah, it doesn't
solution
show one way or another.
is
Yeah,
communism, right?
no, no, no.
Because communism always makes things even worse. So what I always say to people is, so it's almost my motto is the fact that things are bad, if you think they are, is no excuse to make them a million times worse. But that always seems to be the sort of the communist recipe. Oh, things are bad, so we must do this. We must make them a million times worse. That doesn't make any sense. If things are bad, fix them. Don't make them a million times worse. Communism is not going to redeem you.
Okay, so closing thoughts. What can we do next? What the listeners are all listening. And guys, I recommend checking out Management of Reality. It's MOR. Dr. Gil White. Check out his site, his YouTube channel, and we'll leave a link in the description. But give us a closing message on what we could expect and what we can do right now. What can we do
Yeah,
about this?
if you could leave in the description franciscogilwhite.com, that's the address that will take them to all our content,
Okay, great.
whether it's video, books, articles, whatever.
And if you speak
Um,
Spanish, there's a Spanish channel as well.
that's right. We have material in Spanish and
Say it
in
in
English.
Spanish.
La administración de la realidad. That's what management of reality means in Spanish. So what's the question again?
Well, lead us out with a message, what we can do, the listeners, what we can do about what,
Well, this is
what if we agree once we see your material, the questions will definitely be raised. And the question is, what can we do about this?
okay.
This
So
is
the thing that everybody can do, because people should not be feeling powerless. There's something that everyone can do, and that is communicate. We have right now tools of communication that have never existed before that make it possible. We're using one right now, you and I. And these tools of communication make it possible for Westerners to communicate directly with each other. And when one of us is really good at communication, we can become what they call an influencer, right? Someone whose content is viewed by millions of people. We don't know who are the most talented communicators. We don't know. So I think we should take the lesson of America's Got Talent and other similar shows seriously. There's a lot of untapped talent out there. So my recommendation is all of you, every single one of you listening to us right now, open your own YouTube channel and start sharing what you learn. If you think we're doing good work, share it with the world. Do it your own way. Some among you are going to turn out to be communication geniuses. And if every one of you opens their own YouTube channel or their own Instagram account or whatever, um, we will succeed in communicating with Western civilization. And then if we succeed, the West will defend itself and will survive. We will survive this crisis. So if you're asking what can I do, there's two things I recommend you do. One, open your YouTube channel, start communicating with everybody you can, and also have private conversations with people. This is important. Hone your skills by having private conversations with people where you try to explain what's going on and you debate with them. And the other thing you can do is you can give me all your money. If you give me all your money, I will use that money to communicate with more people. So it's money well spent. If you think the channel is doing a good job, impoverish yourself in my benefit. That's what I recommend.
Yes, and obviously, if you're not ready to open a channel, like, share, and subscribe this video. Doing so will make this message get across to more people. Don't just run with the narrative. Usually, there's somebody pulling the strings. Thank you so much, Dr. Gil White.